Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
We are, I think it's safe to say, living in a world that is just driven by an obsession with two things:
Okay, what are they?
permanence and the pursuit of flawlessness. I mean, think about it. We demand endless archives, zero downtime, absolute digital fidelity.
We hit Command Z on every single mistake.
Right. We're constantly trying to erase any evidence that we were ever less than perfect.
And you know what? There's a real price for that obsession, a heavy one. We pave over the cracks, we fear any kind of catastrophic system failure, and we confuse just having a lot of memory storage with actually having self-knowledge.
But the sources we've gathered for this deep dive suggest a really radical counterpoint.
Which is?
That the most necessary act for survival, for creativity, and even, for our own cognitive health is to embrace the exact opposite. To embrace absence, collapse, and even the intentional mistake.
That is a big claim. So that's the core mission today, then.
That's the core mission of this deep dive. We're synthesizing a truly interdisciplinary stack of sources. It ranges from Japanese aesthetic philosophy all the way to Nietzschean critiques of historical paralysis, and then into contemporary law on data privacy.
And even science fiction, right? I saw ruin theory on the list.
And even ruin theory as it manifests in modern science fiction. Exactly.
So let's unpack this central tension right away. If I'm understanding you, our goal is to deconstruct how these fundamental systems, and that could be anything from language to technology to history, don't just tolerate failure.
They require it. They actually require moments of failure or deliberate non-existence to find their real utility and their full potential.
That's fascinating. So where are we going with this? What are the main pillars?
Our journey is structured around three concepts that, at first glance seem totally unrelated.
Okay.
Ruin theory, the digital right to be forgotten, and the aesthetic practice of glitch art.
Not three things you usually see in the same sentence.
Not at all. But they are all, let's say, three-dimensional vectors orbiting the same philosophical engine room. And that engine is the generative power of collapse.
Okay, the engine room. I like
Wow.
that. So to really structure this argument, you're saying we need to wrestle with a fundamental binary, an A versus B, that's defined human culture for, well, forever.
We do. And that binary is memory and presence versus forgetting and absence.
And we can actually personify these, can't we?
We can. That first side memory and presence, you can think of the Greek goddess Mnemosyne. She gave her name to all things mnemonic, memory palaces,
All of that.
And in our modern world, she really represents the absolute ideal of digital permanence. Everything's saved, everything's searchable, forever.
And on the other side, the opposition.
The opposition is forgetting and absence. This is represented by the river Lethe from the Greek underworld, the stream of oblivion. But it's also the Japanese concept of ma, the intentional gap, and even the sudden jarring noise of the glitch.
So here's the key question then. What is the hidden mechanism? How do these two sides interact?
This is what we're going to reveal today. The hidden mechanism is that absence, that intentional gap, that system failure, or that collapse. It isn't a void to be feared or immediately filled.
It's generative.
It is a fundamentally generative force that creates utility, possibility, and critically, an authentic human experience precisely by clearing the slate.
And the stakes here, for you listening, are actually pretty high. I mean, if we keep striving for this absolute digital permanence, we risk stunting our own personal growth. You can never escape your past self.
And you diminish creativity by focusing way too much on past achievements instead of future potential.
Right. So if your moral and cultural life runs on a kind of social software, what we're here to argue is that you might just need a catastrophic system crash.
A moment of ruin?
A moment of ruin, one that forces an inspection of the code and allows you to install a healthier, more adaptive operating system.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start this exploration of absence with aesthetics. Let's begin with one of the most compelling and philosophically complex concepts in our sources.
That's MAA. It's spelled with the Japanese character O, which means interval or gap.
And most people, when they hear ma, they probably think of something simple, like negative space or white space in design.
And that is such a clumsy and incomplete translation. It really doesn't do it justice. Our sources define ma as something much more profound. It's the intentional interval between physical elements and the temporal pause in time.
So it's not just emptiness.
No, it's not just the nothingness. It is the mental space that is created by that nothingness.
It's the active void. This idea is, it's fundamentally rooted in Zen Buddhist philosophy, right?
Right.
Which places this immense value on emptiness and impermanence. You see it in the wabi-sabi aesthetic.
That's right. And Ma is so essential because it's the prerequisite for harmony, for balance, and most importantly, for contemplation. You simply cannot contemplate if your entire field of vision is jammed with information.
There's no room to think.
There's no room. And to really make this utility of non-existence stick, we have to turn to this ancient analogy. It's often attributed to the Taoist philosopher Lao Tzu.
I think I know this one.
He explained this thousands of years ago in terms of just fundamental utility. Think about the physical world. He says, 30 spokes join together at one hub, but it is the hole in the center that makes it operable.
The hole in the center.
Clay is molded into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that makes it useful.
I think that analogy is the whole key to this deep dive. Existence is what we have. The pot, the wheel, the digital archive. But non-existence is the part we actually use.
Precisely. And you see this concept manifest everywhere in traditional Japanese arts. In ink wash painting, or sumi, the vast empty space in a landscape isn't just wasted canvas.
It's part of the composition.
It's an active element that defines the mountains and trees that are painted. It forces your eye to process the relationship between the existing elements and the void they inhabit.
And in architecture, the utility of Ma becomes spatial but also social. I'm thinking of the Ingawa.
The veranda, yes.
That transitional porch space that's neither fully inside nor fully outside. It acts as a buffer zone. Or you could think about the shoji screens, those flexible, translucent barriers.
They divide rooms without solidifying the space. They allow light and shadow to move, and they acknowledge that space is fluid and temporary.
Right. And critically, Ma cultivates this appreciation of transience. There's a term for this, isn't there?
Mono-aware. It's this poignant, almost gentle melancholy that's caused by recognizing the fleeting nature of things. When you appreciate the pause, or the silence, or the gap, you heighten the emotional and aesthetic impact of what's left.
Because you're aware that it too will pass.
Exactly.
So that brings us to our hypermodern digital world.
Sure.
How does this ancient contemplative concept of the active void translate into our always-on environment?
The answer is it's absolutely vital for good user experience UX and user interface UI design. The best designers apply Ma beyond just visual white space and into the temporal dimension.
The time between actions.
The time between actions. And leading tech companies, whether they realize they're doing it or not, they use this intentional absence to guide user behavior and reduce cognitive overwhelm.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about your iPhone. When you open an app or you transition between screens on iOS, the movement is fluid. It's never abrupt.
Right, there's a little animation, a slide.
Those subtle, purposeful animations that fill that brief pause, that is temporal Ma in action. It signals to your brain, I'm processing, without making you anxious. It turns that downtime into purposeful anticipation.
Airbnb is a master of this too. If you've ever booked a trip, you know it's a really complex task. There are multiple data inputs. You're moving from searching a city to filtering dates to reviewing payments. It's a lot of demanding steps.
And what does Airbnb do? They use these brief fades, slides, and really carefully crafted subtle loading indicators to connect those steps. Those milliseconds of intentional transition give you, the user, time for a cognitive reset.
So you don't feel like you're being overwhelmed by a sudden wall of information.
Exactly. It prevents that feeling. And Google does something very similar. When you hit enter on a complex search, there's often that fraction of a second pause before the results stream in.
Sometimes with a little loading graphic.
Right. That minimal pause manages your expectations. It creates a sense of deliberate high-stakes processing rather than just a frantic, instantaneous data dump. It actually instills confidence in the result.
Yeah, the science on this is pretty solid, right? This isn't just a design theory.
No, the science rigorously backs this up. It confirms that intentional absence is a powerful cognitive reset mechanism. Neuroscientific research has shown that environments designed with balanced negative space, the digital equivalent of MODOD, they trigger activation in the default mode network, or DMN.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. The default mode network. This is the neural system that fires up when you are not focused on an external task, correct?
That's the one. It's what handles introspection, mind-wandering, daydreaming.
All the crucial creative thinking. It's the part of your brain that connects the disparate ideas.
Precisely. If your visual or digital environment constantly demands your attention, if every screen is cluttered, if every moment is filled with noise, your prefrontal cortex, the part that handles decision-making and filtering, it just goes into metabolic overdrive.
You get fatigued. decision fatigue.
You get fatigued. But when the environment introduces calculated emptiness, the prefrontal cortex experiences a measurable reduction in metabolic activity, and the DMN gets to work.
And our sources cited a study that really drove this point home for me. Participants were exposed to images of spaces designed with prominent negative space, minimalist or Japanese styles.
And what happened?
They showed a staggering 27% reduction in cortisol levels.
Cortisol, the primary stress hormone.
The primary stress hormone. And critically, this reduced stress state persisted for hours after the initial exposure. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling.
And this isn't just about feeling less stressed, it's about optimizing your perception. Perceptual psychology confirms that strategic negative space leverages the figure-ground relationship. It enhances the significance of what is there.
So your brain, because it's freed from processing all the noise, dedicates more resources to appreciating the quality of the information that's left.
Exactly. And I love this detail. Eye tracking studies conducted in these MA-influenced spaces document a measurable decrease in visual saccades.
Those are the rapid, involuntary eye movements we make when we're scanning a complex scene.
Right. And they decreased by up to 40% when the environment was simpler. This allows for deeper, more sustained visual engagement with fewer elements. It moves you from just scanning the world to truly seeing it.
And on a purely physiological level.
Environments influenced by MAP principles document decreased respiratory rates and lower blood pressure, mirroring the effects you get during meditative states.
So the intentional gap, the absence, is literally helping us breathe and think better.
Literally.
So we've established the generative power of intentional absence with Ma. If Ma is the space we deliberately create and curate, what happens when space is created for us? When the system breaks down, whether we want it to or not?
Now we pivot. We move from silent, deliberate absence to the noise of intentional failure. The glitch. This moves us from minimalist Zen contemplation into the realm of radical aesthetic practice.
Glitch art. This is an artistic practice where digital or analog system, failures, errors in code, corruption in a file, hardware breaking down, they aren't just preserved.
They're actively utilized and often engineered to create visually appealing compositions. The artist freezes the error, makes it noticeable, or even accelerates its creation.
And this practice serves as a really profound philosophical critique of our modern pursuit of perfect visual fidelity.
Absolutely. I mean, why does the machine strive for perfection? Because the capitalist framework demands seamless consumption. The glitch is a deliberate wrench thrown into that engine. It embraces chaos and randomness.
What's truly fascinating is that glitch art performs this critical function by revealing the concealed, vulnerable operational framework of technology. Every user-friendly interface is just a veneer, right? It's hiding all this complex and fragile programming code.
And by exposing the fragmentation and the error, the art makes the system's structure vulnerable, legible, and, ironically, more human.
You can see it in the aesthetic language of the glitch. It's unmistakable. You get severe pixel fragmentation, the separation of the RGB color channels.
Digital noise, static compression artifacts that smear and block out the image, it generates this powerful sense of illegibility, but also a kind of beautiful distortion.
The intentionality is really the key here. It's not just capturing a moment when your computer crashed. Artists use specific techniques.
Like data moshing, which is the deliberate manipulation of the video compression process.
How does that work?
By deleting the keyframes, so the complete image frames, and leaving only the intermediary movement-predicting frames, you get the spectacular bleeding effect where one image just melts into the next.
Wow. And then there's circuit bending.
Right, where artists will deliberately short-circuit or modify the internal hardware of old electronic devices like synthesizers or even children's toys to force them to produce these unpredictable, chaotic sounds or visuals.
You're turning a pristine, functional machine into a chaotic, creative collaborator.
You are, and the appeal for the audience is multi-layered. For anyone who remembers pre-broadband life, the glitch evokes a powerful sense of nostalgia.
Oh, absolutely. A reminder of the early, imperfect days of digital media. The tracking issues on a VHS tape, the jagged graphics of early video games.
The horrible sound of a dial-up modem connecting.
What were once considered failures are now embraced as this raw, organic beauty.
And crucially, the glitch introduces genuine unpredictability. In a digital world where everything is reproducible, controlled, and standardized, the randomness of a unique glitch, an error that can't be immediately replicated, makes the artwork feel incredibly human and spontaneous.
So it's an artistic statement that fundamentally challenges the notion that perfection is always the ideal.
It says the flaw is not a fault, the flaw is a feature. The glitch is the moment when the hidden architecture of the digital world, the code, breaks through the surface and insists on its own materiality.
So we have explored the utility of aesthetic absence with Ma and intentional failure with the glitch, all in the present. Now let's zoom out. Let's consider the necessity of failure, or oblivion, in the grand sweep of time and memory.
We're traveling deep into the philosophical and mythological foundations of memory, using the Greek framework. We're going to the underworld and its two central rivers that determine the fate of the dead and the initiated.
To the right is the river Lethe, the stream of forgetfulness, or oblivion. The newly arrived dead were required to drink from it to wash away all the memories of their previous life.
Which allowed them to enter the next cycle completely unburdened. Lethe is the patron of the clean slate.
But to the left, there's another river, Mnemosyne, the river of memory.
And this river was sought out only by those initiated in the Orphic Pythagorean tradition. To drink from Mnemosyne was to secure heroic happiness, to end transmigration, and to ensure that your essential knowledge and identity would persist.
And this duality, memory versus forgetting, it's not just a myth. It defines whether we are truly free to live in the present.
And this brings us straight to Friedrich Nietzsche. In his work on the use and disadvantage of history for life, he provided this profound, even alarming case for the necessity of Lent, the power of forgetting if we are to avoid historical paralysis.
His argument is philosophically explosive. He says historical knowledge is only important insofar as it actively helps us live well in the present moment.
Right. If history takes up too much mental and cultural space, it diminishes our present experience, it paralyzes action, and it suffocates our future potential. You become a prisoner of the past.
And he was particularly critical of the intellectual climate of 19th century Germany, which he felt suffered from historicism.
The overuse of history as a means of defining the present. He identified 3 species of history, each with its own specific necessary function, but also its own inherent and catastrophic risk if it's allowed to dominate.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, monumental history. This looks back at the great moments in the struggle of the human individual, the towering achievements, the exceptional figures as ideals to follow. It's meant to be inspirational, to prove that greatness is possible.
But the risk, the Nietzschean warning, is that monumental history leads to just repeating historical acts without considering the context. It creates this mindset where we're always trying to mimic past heroes.
And ignoring the potential for a unique new future. Think of every corporate strategy meeting that cites Apple or Henry Ford without understanding the fundamental shifts in the market today. It takes the focus away from the potential greatness of the present.
Okay, what's the second type?
Second, we have antiquarian history. This is the history that preserves the past for its own sake. It's tied to a deep conservative sense of identity and belonging, a nation, a culture, a lineage.
And it is a service to life, he says, because it preserves the things that make us feel rooted.
But the danger here is a limited, fearful field of vision. Antiquarian history breeds a deep fear of all things new, because progress might destroy the objects or traditions that the antiquarian worships.
It can lead to an obsession with cultural gatekeeping and a total inability to adapt. You become so concerned with preserving the old foundation that you never build the new house.
Precisely. And finally, there is critical history. Its task is radical: to take history apart, to investigate the pieces, criticize the necessary parts, and suggest improvements that allow us to break chains inherited from the past.
But even this critical act has a requirement. Nietzsche reminds us that it has to be approached with a genuine respect for the past. It's not just about smashing the archives.
No, it's inspecting them to see which parts are still functional and which must be consciously discarded. It requires the power of Lethe to forget the old definition in order to engage in critical action.
So the underlying concept tying all of Nietzsche's critique together is this absolute necessity of separating a thing's origin from its use value.
He argues so forcefully that we should not look to history to decide what a thing is useful for now. We have to look at what the thing can do of and by itself in the present, completely unburdened by its historical intention.
So forgetting, or at least allowing the origin to fade, is a necessary life force that enables forward motion.
It is. And we see this tension, the power of lethe versus the necessity of mnemosyne, play out dramatically in archives and museums where the physical objects themselves become an epistemological battleground.
Our sources explore the example of the Trondheim Kunstmuseum and a collection it holds, the Eiknes collection, which contains numerous so-called primitive objects with often dubious origins or lost provenance.
The documentation, the historical memory, is just missing.
And traditionally, the museum institution defines the canon by declaring artistic significance, often through documented context. Who made it, when, how it was acquired. But what happens when that crucial information is gone?
That is a moment of cultural forgetfulness. Lethe has washed over that part of the archive.
And this lack of information is not a defect. It can be beneficial. It's absence creating possibility.
Right. The museum is allowed to reevaluate the previously established canon and use those objects to explore the question, what is considered art now? They are unbound by their original context or classification, forcing the institution to rethink its role in defining art in the present.
But to contrast that power of forgetting, we have to look to A.B. Warburg's unfinished Mnemosyne Atlas.
Warburg, who was literally named after the goddess of memory, devoted his life to an attempt to trace persistent symbolic images, icons of great pathos and emotional impact, across the memory of Western culture.
He arranged them non-linearly on these large wooden display boards.
His method was iconology, studying the life and afterlife of these symbols, tracing their persistence. He was trying to create the ultimate visual archive of collective cultural memory. But here is the profound irony. The original wooden boards of his atlas have not survived.
That are gone.
Only photographs of the arrangements remain.
So we have both Nietzsche and Warburg, these titans of intellectual history, leaving behind unfinished ideas like Nietzsche's unwritten essays or Warburg's lost arrangement of boards.
These incomplete works are not forgotten, but they exist as outlines, as potential.
And the generative power here lies in the fact that they were never fully actualized.
Exactly. This intentional or unintentional non-completion enables the texts and the atlas to be continually developed, redeveloped, and shaped by future generations to meet the specific needs of their time and place. The outline of potential is the unforgotten truth, forcing us to fill in the blanks rather than just archiving a final product.
That distinction between the productive outline and the paralyzing archive is the perfect bridge to our current crisis. If cultural forgetting is necessary for the health of society, what happens when forgetting becomes technologically impossible?
Now we're talking about the crisis of digital permanence, where memory is mandatory. Our primary guide here is Victor Meyer-Schonberger, the author of Delete, The Virtue of Forgetting in the Digital Age.
And his premise is simple. Digital technology enables perpetual memory, perfect remembering, which overrides our natural human capacity to forget and to forgive.
And the technological drivers are just relentless. Massive digitization of information, storage that's almost free, retrieval that is instantaneous, and a global reach that means anything posted anywhere can be found everywhere.
These forces have eliminated the natural erosion of memory that used to be a necessary built-in function of human life. Things used to just fade away.
And the consequences are terrifying, particularly for the evolving self. Meyer-Schonberger told the story of a woman who was denied a teaching certificate years ago. The reason? A decade-old MySpace photo surfaced.
Oh no?
It showed her in a pirate costume, drinking from a plastic cup which her future employer presumed to contain alcohol.
That MySpace photo story is the ultimate horror movie for anyone who grew up online. It's clinical proof that the past self is never retired. That photo was completely irrelevant, taken out of context, yet it ruined a life in the present.
It proves that permanent digital memory harms personal growth and the very idea of reconciliation.
Because human learning requires forgetting. It requires the ability to move past mistakes, to evolve beyond the person you were 3 years ago or 10 years ago.
But the persistence of perfect digital memory creates an environment of permanent self-surveillance. You have to constantly manage not just the present self, but retroactively manage every single digital footprint you have ever left.
And this problem has escalated to the point of global legal intervention. The first major response was the right to be forgotten, the RTBF.
Right, enshrined in the EU's GDPR. This allows individuals to request the removal of irrelevant, outdated, or excessive data links from search engines, effectively allowing them to edit their own history.
But this introduces a massive tension we have to address. If individuals can scrub their digital histories, it directly conflicts with the societal imperative to preserve a complete and accessible right to history.
Of course. Scholars, journalists, historians, They rely on primary source material. If people are actively erasing their digital trail, the RTBF risks fundamentally altering history itself, replacing truth with intentional absence.
And if that wasn't complex enough, a counter-concept has emerged now, the right to be remembered, or RTBR.
Which is not about protecting privacy. It's about protecting one's existence in the collective memory, especially as AI takes over knowledge synthesis.
Explain that.
Think about it. As AI large language models synthesize responses, they concentrate power over information in a few large vendors. These AIs are trained on existing documented data. If you have a limited digital presence, or if your narrative is complicated or marginalized,
The AI might just omit you.
it may simply omit you. The RTBR seeks to minimize the risk of this AI-driven information omission and maximize the truthfulness of synthesized AI responses, countering the gradual algorithmic erasure of those with limited digital profile.
That's a fascinating inversion of the problem. First, we feared being remembered too much. That was the right to be forgotten.
And now we're starting to fear being forgotten by the machine, the right to be remembered. It just highlights how critical the balance between lethe and mnemosyne truly is.
So what's the solution? Did Mayer Schoenberger propose anything?
He proposed an ingeniously simple solution to code the virtue of forgetting back into digital systems. Expiration dates on information.
Just like food.
Just like food.
Hmm.
Just as history had a natural decay rate, where documents turned brittle or archives were lost to fire, we need to artificially reintroduce that decay rate into our digital world.
That seems appealingly simple, but I have to ask, who sets the date? Doesn't that just replace the technological problem of permanent storage with a political problem of censorship or arbitrary timelines?
That is the precise question that must be debated publicly, and that's why the concept is so vital. It forces us to acknowledge that memory is a political act, not just a technical one.
We have to define value over volume.
Exactly. And on a personal level, this means the growing importance of what one source called internet hygiene, teaching younger generations that since the system cannot forget, they must be hyper-intentional about what they allow into the archive in the first place.
Now we shift fully from philosophy and law to pure speculation. We're moving to ruin theory, which finds its most generative and dramatic framework in science fiction.
Right. Ruin theory, as articulated by thinkers like Brian Dillon and John Trigg, interprets ruin as both an aesthetic condition and a narrative method. A ruin is not merely an architectural artifact of the past.
It's a profound theoretical lens that frames our relationship to time, memory, and meaning.
They call ruins temporal palimpsests. If you imagine a palimpsest as a parchment that has been erased and reused, a ruin is a structure that's been built, destroyed, and rebuilt over time, with the ghostly outlines of its previous lives still visible.
So the ruin is as much about what remains as what has been irrevocably lost.
And science fiction, or SF, is uniquely suited for this because it allows us to project decay forward. It imagines post-catastrophe remnants and broken futures as core strategies for storytelling. It takes the idea of system collapse and makes it structural, recursive, and epistemological.
It destabilizes both the fictional world and our understanding of it as readers.
And our sources identify three primary registers in which these speculative ruins operate within the SF genre. It moves from the collapse of knowledge to the collapse of the self, and finally to the collapse of meaning itself.
Let's take the first register. Epistemic ruins. This is when the knowledge system itself breaks down.
This happens when the phenomenon you encounter resists categorization. It generates illegibility rather than knowledge. The archive fails you.
And the prime contemporary example here is Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, the expeditions into Area X. This is not just a geographical exploration, it's an epistemological descent.
The environment, the biological mimicry, the shifting terrain, the unexplained phenomena, it actively resists scientific observation and linguistic categorization.
And the biologist's journal, which is meant to be a reliable internal archive of the journey, gradually dissolves in tone and coherence. The entries become fragmented, poetic, unreliable.
The ruin is incarnate not in a collapsed building, but in the failure of observation, the inability to know, and the breakdown of the foundational framework of science itself.
Another great example is Arkady Martin's A Memory Called Empire. It's set in this highly advanced, memory-obsessed civilization where cultural and political knowledge is literally embedded within technological imperial memory implants. They're called imago machines.
And these mnemonic systems, designed for absolute fidelity, they begin to glitch. They misalign identity across time. The protagonist becomes the living site of archival entropy.
That unavoidable gradual decay or corruption inherent in any storage system, even a digital brain.
Right. It reveals that memory as technology is precarious and subject to corrosion, forcing the characters to grapple with what knowledge they can truly trust.
Okay, so that's the collapse of knowledge. What's the second register?
The second register is posthuman ruin and ontological decay. This is when the boundary of the self erodes under systemic strain. Here, the body or the mind becomes the ruinous site of contradiction and breakdown.
You have to look at William Gibson's Neuromancer. The protagonist's case is already a psychic ruin at the start of the novel. His nervous system was intentionally burned out by his former employer as an act of retaliation.
Leaving him functionally disabled, unable to jack into cyberspace.
And even when he's rehabilitated by advanced biotech, his selfhood is always mediated by architecture, by corporate algorithms, by his implants. He's a survivor, but he's a deeply fragmented one.
The posthuman subject in Gibson's work is a ruin in motion, surviving only through constant breakdown and mediation. It exposes the inherent fragility of system-bound selves. The ruin here is not an aftermath you walk past. It's an ongoing, persistent state of selfhood.
And finally, the third register, semiotic collapse and linguistic ruin. This is the confrontation with the ultimate system failure, language.
Ruin manifests as semiotic decay when the relationship between the signifier, the word, and the signified, the thing, unravels.
China Miéville's Embassy Town is the perfect illustration of this. The alien hosts can only speak literal, unambiguous truth. Their language, which is just called language, is a fundamental connection between reality and utterance.
And then humans introduce metaphor, language that allows symbolic displacement, lying, approximation, and it acts like a semantic virus, causing a cognitive and societal collapse among the hosts.
So the ruin in this sense is linguistic in the purest meaning. It's not a destroyed city, but a destroyed capacity to mean. When the words break, the world breaks.
And we see this played out more subtly in Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. It's set on a dying Earth so ancient that terminology has decayed into archaism. The very prose used in the narrative is archaic and strange.
So it enacts the linguistic decay for you, the reader. You're destabilized, forced to interpret a world where the meaning of words like fulgurator or Claude has faded.
These speculative ruins are potent conceptual artifacts. They force us to think against our human desire for completeness and permanence. They foreground not only what has been lost, but what remains possible in the fragmented wake of breakdown.
So to navigate a landscape defined by wreckage and forgetting, we need a special kind of navigational tool.
We do. We need to introduce the concept of nostalgia, but a very specific, productive kind, defined by the theorist Svetlana Boym as reflective nostalgia.
Reflective nostalgia. This is the ability to comfortably inhabit and linger in the ambivalence of fragmented memories. It embraces the fact that the past is broken, incomplete, and cannot be perfectly recovered.
And this contrasts sharply with restorative nostalgia, which is dangerous because it scavenges the ruins only to reconstruct a false, idealized past under the guise of truth or tradition.
Reflective nostalgia, by contrast, is like viewing a blurred image through a dusty window pane. It embraces the incomplete nature of memory as a source of reflection, not restoration.
And this echoes the philosophy of Walter Benjamin, who introduced that unforgettable image of the angel of history.
The angel is driven into the future by the unstoppable storm of progress, but it's forced to look back, aghast, at the single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage behind it.
Benjamin's angel is the ultimate creature of reflective nostalgia. This profound dissatisfaction with the present is not sentimental escapism. It's a critical, revolutionary act against the status quo. It's an act of attention.
The true picture of the past, Benjamin argues, flits by. The past can be seized only as an image which flashes up at the instant when it can be recognized and is never seen again.
This fleeting nature of the past, this instant of pure recognition, it demands a pre-intentional, attentive stillness, the exact kind of contemplative pause that Ma provides.
And finally, Benjamin's flaneur, that aimless, observant wanderer of the 19th century city, he has to be reincarnated in the digital age.
The digital flaneur. The person who explores the vast labyrinth of online environments, not hunting for specific information, but opening themselves up to unexpected, fragmented encounters with the past.
It means stopping to scroll aimlessly, but doing it on purpose. Not hunting for something, but just letting the digital wreckage and the forgotten corners wash over you.
And this seemingly purposeless exploration becomes a revolutionary act against the acceleration and homogenization of modern digital culture.
So let's synthesize this vast journey we've been on. We began with the aesthetic and cognitive necessity of absence, revealed through the Japanese concept of ma and its scientifically validated ability to trigger cognitive rest and creativity.
We then moved into the political and personal necessity of conscious forgetting of lethe, exemplified by Nietzsche's critique of historical paralysis and the complicated, necessary legal debates surrounding the right to be forgotten.
And the emerging right to be remembered in our age of perpetual memory.
And we concluded with ruin theory in science fiction, where we traced systemic collapse across knowledge, self, and language, realizing that ruin is not an end state but an ongoing condition, a way of being in and with the world that demands reflective engagement and adaptation.
The core lesson we can take away, then, is that our collective cultural obsession with perfection and permanence is, ironically, deeply self-defeating.
The glitch in the code, the pause in the rhythm, the loss of historical context, these moments of failure and absence are precisely what enable new modes of perception, reflection, and resistance.
So if we return to our master analogy, imagine your moral, cultural, and digital life runs on software.
The ruin, the system crash, the glitch, the intentional forgetting is the necessary trigger that reveals the vulnerable underlying code. It forces us to pause, clear the field, and install an updated, more adaptive operating system.
The broken archive invites rereading. The fragmented self discovers new relationality. The glitched sentence opens toward altered cognition. We have to seize the moment of failure as a moment of profound possibility.
And this deep dive provides you with the philosophical toolkit to find the generative potential in every mistake, every pause, and every fragmented memory you encountered today.
And this leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to explore on your own.
In ancient Greek, aletheia, unforgetfulness, is often translated as truth. But we have spent this entire time establishing that perfect memory is not synonymous with truth and, in fact, often hides it. If we accept that, then perhaps what we must strive for is not the perfection of memory, but the relentless pursuit of what was never forgotten in the first place, the outlines of potential, the unwritten words, the intentional empty space, and realize that truth might reside only in the parts that haven't yet been built or filled.